Podcast Network. The light shines brightest on our indie podcasts.
You are interested in the unknown, the mysterious, the unexplainable. That is why you are here.
3, 2, 1.
Spook.
We are gathered here as advisors, as scientists.
The kind of place we expect a ghost to like to wander around.
Hey, we all know that we're going down, baby.
I'll help you. I'm something of a witch.
Welcome to Mission Spooky. I'm your fantastic host, JC. With me, not as per usual, the queen of everything herself, Kiki. There is no cryptid. Well, there is a cryptid enthusiast, but it's not Cord today. Kiki, introduce our guest.
Today we welcome 25-year veteran of the paranormal and high strangeness, Mr. Chad Lewis. How you doing today, bud?
Greetings from the Northwoods of Wisconsin.
Yes, I'm so excited. Right off the bat, what's really funny is we did a Van Meter Visitor episode already, and I used your book as our basis for the information. And I don't know if you're like a gamer per se, Dungeons and Dragons by any chance?
Obviously, because of Stranger Things, I know about D&D and just growing up when I did, but I never really got to play the game.
Ah.
Is the Visitor in there? Did someone put the Visitor in there?
I did.
Oh, perfect.
I did. Yeah, we started, it was kind of by accident. Another podcaster friend of ours named Logan Vo, he has a D&D podcast as well. He's a huge Cryptid fan. And we came up with Cord versus Cryptid. And I make the stat blocks for the creatures. I have an artist that does the artwork. And the Van Meter Visitor was the first one, right, JC? Am I crazy? Wasn't it Van Meter first and then La Lechuza after that? Yeah.
I believe you are correct.
Yeah. So it's partially your fault, Chad.
Well, it is fitting since we did create D&D here in Wisconsin. We're the home of Dungeons and Dragons. So
Yep.
That's pretty interesting as well.
So thank you.
Well, if the character works out great, then you can thank me. But
So far, it's been working.
Good.
Speaking of Logan, he actually, I think he said that he met you one time because he's from Iowa. You're at every Van Meter Visitor con, I guess, or
yeah, every year they put
festival.
together the festival. Yes, and this upcoming year, 2023, will be the 10th anniversary of that festival. That the town hosts this festival to celebrate their unique history, and the town itself is about the same as it was in 1903. Maybe a few hundred more people, but not many. And the downtown is nearly identical. So it's really cool that you get to go to this small town, see exactly where people were spotting this monster, 120 years ago.
And that actually leads to one of Logan's questions that he had for you, which was, how do you feel about, he had heard from Expedition X calling it the Van Meter Monster instead of the Van Meter Visitor. Which do you prefer?
Well, I enjoyed the Van Meter Visitor. It never had a name. My co-author, Kevin Nelson, came up with it when we were talking about what do we know about this thing. And it was basically that it visited the town and that's about it. So he thought it would be great to be the Van Meter Visitor. And what's interesting about the Expedition X episode is I filmed with them for several days. They had the book. Every time I talked about the creature, it was as the Visitor. But I think sometimes people think that it's trademarked, which is absurd. But yet in today's world, that's what they think. So they use the generic Van Meter Monster. But I think most people know it as the Visitor, but who knows? Call it whatever you want. I think it was so bizarre that it could have multiple names.
Just don't call him late for dinner.
Exactly. I mean, this thing may be reinventing itself like a pop star over the years, changing its name, the monster formerly known as the Visitor, that type of thing. But I think all of it just brings more interest to the legend, which is so bizarre that I love it no matter what people call it. There have been people have based plays on it, which is very interesting as well. And of course, all the TV shows like to portray it, even though after filming a couple days with Expedition X and giving them the entire story, their conclusion was that it was a shadow of a bat projected by a light on a wall. And that's why people were shooting at it for 5 different nights and trying to capture it because they didn't know what a shadow was.
I love
Yes.
I mean, I would have been happy if they would have picked anything. Say it was a turkey vulture, a hoax, a bank robber, anything, but the people of Van Meter didn't know what a shadow was on the wall, and that's what terrified them. So I thought it was pretty funny, but it's par for the course for a lot of shows that I've been on that, you may film for several days, give them hours and hours of the real history and legend, and then, they know exactly what they want the show to be like before they even film it. So at some point, it doesn't even matter if you're there. I'm just glad they got the town right.
We just talked about this. We were doing the Dover Demon with someone who you've been on his show before, Paul Bestel.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. So Paul was on because we've been friends with him for a long time because of Ghost Story Guys. And we were able to, his schedule is crazy. And so we finally had him on. And
Paul's amazing. Paul's just great.
Right? I love his show. He's so much fun to talk to. Yeah. And we feel the same way. It's like, come on, man. Like a lot of times when you see these things, it's this, or it's an owl was the other big one. Oh, it's an owl. Yeah. Okay. No. I know what an owl looks like. I know what a turkey vulture looks like. I know what a deer looks like. Come on, man.
So I won't name the show, but years ago I did mini episodes for this one show. And it was funny because I was watching one episode and I realized that they had taken a piece of info I said about a different monster and just inserted it into an episode they wanted. So I might be talking about how this thing terrified the town or this or that. And I was talking about Monster A, but they were doing a episode on Monster B and had that excess footage and thought, we'll just throw it in there. Who cares? We're making it all up as we go anyway.
Oh, boy. Yeah.
I love how serious the media aspect of the paranormal community.
Well, I think it's important because whether we like it or not, TV is the most popular medium for this stuff today. And when I first got into this field, it was books. What authors did I respect? And I still remember vividly when Jerome Clark's The Unexplained first came out. It was 1993-ish, and I picked it up. And it was one of those books, if you're not familiar, that had a chapter on everything. So one night you'd read about you'd read about the sprites, the little people, right? And then the next night you'd read about demonic possession and then crop circles. And it was just amazing that he put all this into one thing. But today when I meet people, they usually tell me how they got into the field by what show they liked or what host influenced them the most. So that has changed quite a bit from, what author really influenced you or what author did you enjoy their work to just more modern day, what shows influence you. And I don't think it's worse or better. I just think it's different.
I completely agree with that because, when I was young, it was my first book was, actually the very first book was the famous Usborne book of ghosts that came out, the late 70s? Because I was a kid. And then after that, it was Addie Kent Smith from around here because I'm in Bucks County, I'm closer to Philadelphia, and we have great places around here. So New Hope, Pennsylvania is one of those places, and Addie Kent did a whole book about it and published it herself, and it was very much folklore based, and then the folklore and matching up the hauntings with the history. So that's where I got my passion for basically ghosts and the folklore aspect of it, and which is why I enjoy reading your books because you're very much the same. I think the same in that way. I love your folklore books because there's some crazy stuff out there that people miss,
I completely agree. And my background is in the field of psychology, but I really consider myself more of a folklorist today than a researcher of the strange or, paranormal investigator, because I'm really interested in more of what these legends and folklore mean to us in a greater context of society or how they influence us today, more so than whether or not they actually happen. Because if someone contacts me and tells me that they encountered a werewolf, out on a lonely backroads adventure that it's very difficult for me to prove or disprove that. You almost have to take them at their word until they give you a reason not to. And there's only so much you can do with that sighting. But me, I'm looking at the overall bigger picture of it and what do these patterns mean and what the folklore means and why they're so important to us and why they become rites of passage and tests of bravery. And I think that happened to me early on because when I got into this field, like a lot of people, I imagine, it was, oh, I'm going to solve this case. I'll figure out what's going on here. No big deal. And then, after years of doing it and being no closer to answers on my end, a lot of my colleagues burned out because they'd go to these places and maybe nothing would happen, or it wasn't as sexy as it was on TV that they showed things flying around the room and people speaking in tongues, that type of thing. When you're out there, a lot of the time nothing's happening. So I switched early on to see it as the adventure of the whole thing rather than, coming up with definitive proof.
That is an amazing perspective and way to I don't want to say change the goalpost in a bad way, but a different way to view how to look at the paranormal and these encounters for sure. I really like that.
It was a way for me to stay interested over all these years when I could probably count on a couple fingers of times when I thought something out of the ordinary actually happened. But I can tell you that it's never been more interesting and more entertaining and bizarre to me than hitting the back roads, stopping at mom and pop places, speaking with witnesses and general public, hitting roadside attractions that I'm a sucker for. And I can't tell you how many people contact me about them going to a legend, but the stories they want to tell aren't even necessarily about the legend. It's about maybe breaking down or getting turned around and lost in this woods and this thing happened. So oftentimes it's like traveling. When you're traveling and something out of the ordinary happens in a bad way, you really curse it at the time and you think this ruined my trip. But years later, those are usually the stories you're telling that you remember. So I try to take that view of it these days of seeing it all as an adventure that hopefully something happens. Maybe it will, maybe it will not, but at least I'm going to have an adventure.
Indeed. And it's, and this is a quote I think I just came up with off the top of my head. It's about the journey, not the destination,
Yes.
Yeah, Jason.
Pretty sure no one's ever said that before.
You better trademark that.
Yeah, I think I will. I'll get it on t-shirts.
So I like the traveling part of it. I watched Paranormal Prairie that you were on, and let's see, it's been a hot minute since I watched it, but I think it was just called the Gates of Hell. Like you had to go through the 7 gates, right? Or which are basically bridges.
Yeah, they're basically tunnels, most of them over old railroad bridges. And the Gates of Hell, or the Gates to Hell, some people call it. And it is said that if you start to pass through a couple of these, weird things will begin to happen. You'll start to see apparitions, disembodied lights. You might hear voices talking to you. You can pass through 4 or 5 of them. You might start seeing the hellhounds that are thought to patrol these gates. And then, of course, if you make it through all 7 in one night, hopefully ending up at midnight in the 7th, you'll see a portal to hell that will open up and swallow you in. And believe it is or not, as weird as that sounds, I've talked to people who claimed that they saw the portal, that, they saw heat rising up. They felt it. They saw the flames coming toward them. And unfortunately, most of them didn't stick around to find out if it really was a portal. And those who did are obviously in hell and can't talk to me about it. But that's such a great legend of where did this come from? What's the origin? How does it keep going from generation to generation about portals to hell?
Oh, yeah, because we have our own legend here, which, it could really be disproven, for obvious reasons. But it is a legend. It's like one of those things that just kept getting passed down over and over and over again. That's kind of interesting how it didn't change all these years. But yeah, no one's ever seen anything at this particular Gates of Hell in Pennsylvania, but it's not in Philadelphia. I know some people may think that that's where it is. We haven't talked about it on the show yet, so that might be something we need to we'll bookmark that for later. But I loved watching you in Paranormal Prairie because you said the same thing. You were like, well, too bad I can't talk to anybody because if they did go through it, well, they're gone. So that sucks.
Goodbye. But at least they found out. They did the legend.
Right?
But so many people tell me, like, in their community that these legends were just something they did during high school or every new generation. That was just something that was done in the community. You'd go out to the old whatever place, sit on the mausoleum of the haunted grave or what be it. And it was just something everybody did as a rite of passage almost to become part of the group of the community. And I think one area I'm interested in is what happens to these legends when they change. What I mean is, what happens when you've had a haunted forest for 50 years and all of a sudden it becomes a Target parking lot?
Oh, yeah.
Do the spirits move on? Do they stay there? Do they continue?
No, they become Target employees.
Yeah.
They start unloading trucks and stocking shelves.
So it's just amazing that obviously these have no answers to them, but I find that fascinating because so much is happening with that. We had a famous place here in Wisconsin called Haunchyville, where little people, not gnome-like, but below average height people, what would have been called dwarves in the old days, they were circus performers that were said to be tired of their manager mistreating them. So they all moved to this forested area in Wisconsin and they all lived there in this big community hidden away in the forest. And they hired an average sized person with a shotgun to guard the trail into their living quarters. And for decade after decade, people swore that they saw the man shoot at them with the shotgun and they saw the haunchies and all of this. And little by little, the forest started shrinking as these giant McMansions were built around it. So when you go there now, there's still a small forest, but you think this isn't creepy at all. I mean, the mansions are creepy, but the forest isn't.
I love that you used McMansion. I hate those mansions, and I want to go on a rant about how terrible American architecture is in the last 50 years. But that's not the type of show we're on.
I'm listening. Maybe that's his own topic.
Yeah, we'll come on for another episode. We'll do a side episode of the things wrong with American architecture.
There's not enough gargoyles. That's really my only complaint.
Mm.
And I want some more pyramids too. We have the Rosicrucian pyramid here. Again, another one we have to talk about. There's so much to talk about in Pennsylvania.
And I love there's a focus today on very specific places that I think it was History Press, which is now Arcadia Press. And they started doing all of like Ghost of the smallest town you've never heard of. And I love that because they're so specific to an area and there's so many of them that you can find. If you're looking for stories of almost any town, it seems like you can find a book on those legends now.
Yeah, I go into like even Barnes and Nobles. They have local section and there's paranormal history for freaking every little town in this area, which I think is crazy.
So I want to go back for just a moment. Would you do the Seven Gates? Have you tried it?
Every legend I talk about, especially when it's supernatural dares, these places that have the dares attached to them, like if you go through the Seven Gates, I've done all of them. I've done hundreds, if not thousands around the world. I did a book on the supernatural dares of the Midwest where I put all these dares together into one book that, will be the last book you ever read because you're going to perish. But
love it. I love it.
But I take pride in doing it, all of them myself. And I try every place that I write about or that I speak about. I like to have visited and researched for myself because for me, that's very important to get a feel of why people think that chupacabras are running around this cornfield or, whatever the legend may be. It's just being there in person just makes it a lot more significant for me.
You have to do Dares of Pennsylvania then. We got to take you. There's at least 3 here.
Isn't there the graveyard I have to walk around like 7 times?
Yes, we haven't done them yet.
Nonsense.
We didn't do them yet because we started the podcast in the October right before COVID. So we had high hopes of going out to places and then we just couldn't. It was not fun. Yeah, there's the graveyard that if you walk around it 7 times at midnight, you'll get the werewolf to appear, and then you're dead. There's the haunted.
He can try.
There's the haunted rock couch that you're the cursed couch. It's actually a rock that looks like a couch. If you sit in it, then something bad happens. And then there's everybody always has this one too with the particular grave site that if you sit near it or on it, you'll awaken the ghost and you have to deal with her. So, and I liked in Paranormal Prairie, we did wind up talking about this in an episode we did on a cemetery. There's always the turning angel. Yeah, you guys have mentioned one before, and this one's another one that like changes positions.
So many of these angels and just statuary from graveyards are thought to be cursed and move and follow you. Not just with the eyes, which a lot of statues are said to do, but actually transform and move about the cemetery. There's one famous one here again in my home state where the woman walks down, the statue of a woman who drowned walks down to the nearby lake and recreates her death. When people look back, she's right back on the gravestone where she belongs. But yet people swear they've seen her. Or in Iowa, they have the famous Black Angel of Death, where this angel will fly around the cemetery. So it's not just kind of this trickery of its eyes seemingly following you wherever you go, but actual cemetery things moving about. And it's always, 99.9% is always bad luck. If you do these dares or these statues, it's mishap, misfortune, or death that will follow you. And I always joke that it's never anything good, that if you sit in that chair or the couch, you'll win the lottery or find true love.
Right.
It's always do these at your own risk, which obviously adds to the excitement of them.
When we look back at like what our ancestors did for entertainment, I'm like, well, I guess daring people to do things was probably a great form of entertainment. I mean, I personally am still entertained by these things. I want to go sit on the couch. Hopefully I won't get cursed, but
I'm with you. I love it. And I think it's the idea that people love being scared, but in a controlled manner. And it's the same reason we like scary movies and roller coasters where you're safe. And I feel these legends are kind of in the same category where I don't really think a werewolf is going to attack me, but yet I'm terrified when I'm out at these places because your mind doesn't really know the difference of being scared in a controlled manner versus, being a hostage or bank robbery, something of that nature. But I think people love being scared because fear has the same chemicals released as being in love or being intimate with someone or being happy and laughing. That fear in a controlled manner can feel really good, which is why so many people do it. And I think subconsciously back in the 50s, 60s, and 70s, young suitors were doing scientific discovery without knowing it because they would take their dates out to these lover lane areas or these scary places, and they would take them there for a first date, not knowing that if you do something like that, if you take a first date to an amusement park where you get scared, research shows that person views you as much more attractive and views that you'll have a much better connection from being scared together than if you were to take them to a Hallmark Christmas movie.
Yeah.
Well, to be fair, Hallmark Christmas movies are garbage, but I get what you're saying.
It's true, though. Yeah, that's true. I mean, my husband and I went, now that you said that, I was like, oh gosh, funny side story, but we went to go see Resident Evil early on when we were dating, and I did not know that it was about zombies because I never played that particular video game, and he kind of forgot that it was about zombies. Great movie, but we were both very scared because neither one of us really likes zombies. It's mostly the idea of being eaten alive. I'm very much against that.
I'm with you there.
So you have a new book coming out, and I definitely want to talk about that. The Winter Legends and Lore. I've already pre-ordered my copy, so I'm excited. What is that exactly going to entail? Can you give us like a little snippet?
Yes. I love being from the Midwest and growing up, and those of us in winter climates realize that you can't escape winter. You either make peace with it or you have a rough 5-6 months out of the year.
Yeah.
And I love all the legends that sprung up from the winter time. And I think a lot of people don't realize that it wasn't Halloween that was traditionally the scary season. It was winter.
Yep.
Winter was the
Yep.
time to tell ghost stories. Winter was the time when darkness would allow all these supernatural beings to lurk in every nook and cranny. And I love all the winter folklore, but it's all very specific, whether it's the history of Santa Claus or why we decorate Christmas trees or New Year's Eve superstitions and rituals. They were all spread out. And I think a lot of people might be interested in these topics. They might be interested in the history of Christmas caroling, why people would go out caroling, but not to the extent where they want a 400-page book about it. They don't want to be a scholar on it, but they're interested in it. So I combined 20 of the best winter legends from Krampus, the Wendigo, to how you can bring about a snowstorm in your community. And I put them all together in a smaller monograph, about 100 pages. And I put them again because that's the way I wanted it, where I have several books on the history of Santa that are over 400 pages. But for the general public, they don't need that, nor do they want it. So I put these together as almost, I don't want to say cliff notes, but no filler, just the best parts of each legend.
I like that. Yeah. Short and sweet. Keep it to the point. Get you hooked in. And then, I kind of like, if I want to go delve into something a little bit more, then I will. But I don't have any books right now. I don't know of anyone offhand who's done a nice compilation like that of just these winter legends. We talked a little bit about like the Wild Hunt.
Mm-hmm.
That's always really interesting to me too. And yes, like talking about how wintertime was when you were more in danger than in the fall. Everyone wants to focus on Samhain and Halloween, but it's like, no, there was like death and destruction in the wintertime if you didn't do certain things for very obvious reasons. But then also I think that's where the legends might have popped up from, is just this, we're all just trying to survive this, like the Christmas cat.
Yeah, the Yule Cat.
Yes.
It really was a life and death scenario, because you think of it, when winter, everything seems to wither away and die. And there's no guarantee that your crops are going to make it the next year or that your livestock won't go lame. So it really was a battle to survive the winter in hopes that light would finally overcome darkness and that evil spirits would then nowhere be found. So it really was a scary time of the year for most people. Today, I write in the book that we've never had it easier in the winter than any time in history, that no person that has ever walked the earth has had an easier winter than we have today. Most of us have indoor plumbing, electricity, furnace. Most of us, thankfully, have enough food to eat, so we're not worried about that. So whenever I'm griping in the winter that there's nothing good on Netflix to watch, I think back to my ancestors living in a one-room cabin with no indoor plumbing or electricity and no food to eat, and suddenly I feel much better.
I still can't find anything to watch on Netflix.
So you mentioned Wendigo. I have to ask, what's your feelings on, between Skinwalkers and Wendigo? I feel like this is the go-to lately for everybody. If they see something, it's even, we've wound up talking about it here, and it's not even really a local, I would say, legend, but it's not associated with our Native Americans here at all. But yet it seems to be like the buzzword of, this is what it is.
If you see it outside, it's a Skinwalker or Wendigo. If it's inside, it's a ghost or demon. If it's in the sky, it's a UFO. Well, I mean, technically, if you don't know what it is and it's in the sky, it's a UFO. But whatever.
Nice job, JC.
I completely agree. And I don't know if it's because people aren't quite familiar with the literature of the Wendigo, or that media has influenced it a bit. And I'll give you an example. Recently, a gentleman contacted me and he thought he had encountered a Wendigo. So he told the story that he was out hunting with his buddy. They were separated by a couple miles or whatever, far away, enough they didn't know where each other were. And all of a sudden he heard his buddy calling to him. And every time he tried to call back and find his buddy, he couldn't find him, wondering what was going on. So when they met back up at the cabin after it got dark, he said to his friend, "Why were you calling out for me?" And his friend told him, "It wasn't me. I was way off. I didn't see or hear you the whole day." So the witness then thought, "Oh, I saw an episode of Supernatural, the TV show, and their Wendigo episode had the Wendigo being able to mimic human voices." And he said, "Well, that must have been a Wendigo mimicking my friend's human voice." And obviously, the early traditional legends of Wendigo, it would never mimic a human voice. If you heard it, you would freeze in fear, and then it would devour you. So its voice would almost paralyze you. It would not mimic somebody else because it didn't have to. It was the elemental monster of winter. You know, it was indestructible by some account. So it didn't have to resort to that trickery of mimicking. But it showed that that person had seen the Supernatural television show, and therefore it now mimics voices. Much like most people that see a Wendigo or believe they do today, it'll have antlers or big horns on it, like an elk. Where again, in the early traditions, it was more skeletal looking. It was more thin and gaunt, and it never had horns. Sometimes it would have hair on its head, but never really antlers. So that's a new modern thing. And the question then becomes, are people just imagining it, or has the Wendigo morphed and progressed over the last 400 years? Now does it contain antlers? I don't know.
Actually, interesting to think about that it's evolved. Why not?
If these things are like, what's that? It starts with a T. Like people say Slender Man, is it? Where it's like...
Oh, a tulpa?
Tulpa. Yeah, if things like the Wendigo is a kind of like a tulpa, it is what people think it is and believe it is. It would evolve as our culture changes and evolves.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
I don't know. It could be way more fluid than just, oh, these are the ancient legends and it has to be this because it fits these descriptions. And it's like, maybe not. We don't 100% know the rules for anything.
That's exactly right. And we know that people perceive things differently.
Yes.
People can see what you would think would be the same thing happening, but they perceive it quite different from one another. So maybe that's happening as well, that some people see it with antlers, or maybe it projects itself differently to different people. I don't know. There seems to be more questions than answers. And in this field, it seems like every time I think I get a theory to explain something, a new case sets me right back to square one.
We had an episode early on about a place called Hawk Mountain that's not far from where we are. And that was, we called it our Wendigo episode because it had come up, and this is when I had to go into legends and lore from our Native American tribes who were here, the Lenni Lenape. They didn't really have that, but they do have Pukwudgie. So that's something that can mimic voices and try to get you to come in, to them, like come here kind of thing. I think sometimes it's like, the funny thing is, I don't think a lot of people knew about it at the time when we put the episode out, because then the next thing I know, it was one of our most listened to episodes, and people were complaining. They're saying that I didn't portray it evil enough, and I was like, no, hold on a minute.
They're not an evil.
They're mischievous.
Mischievous, yeah.
They're not, just it doesn't have to be evil. That's a whole other issue that I have with everything has to be But yeah, man, Pukwudgies. I said I'll defend them.
Sure.
Because I think they're just trying to be mischievous. Yeah, it doesn't necessarily have to be the Wendigo, guys. Like, we have our own interesting forest folk here that makes a lot more sense, I guess, in my mind. I don't know.
One thing I've learned, or I've come to believe in my own research over these years, and other people will disagree with me on this, is that there really is no tried and true answers. That it's not like you're operating in you're a doctor doing an operation where you have to do it a certain way, otherwise it's not correct. with the folklore, there's so many variations, there's so many different belief systems, so many different legends and lore that, what's to say which one's right and which one is not? That it could be that lore from 200 years ago was completely wrong. We should disregard it. They didn't know what was going on, or vice versa. They knew the exact truth and we don't. So maybe it's just my own belief that I haven't learned as much over the last 30 years as I think I ever learned. I think if I do this for the rest of my life, I still might not be closer to the answers, but other people disagree, and that's why you have sites out there that'll tell you what different colored orbs are thought to represent, or that, for years it was Sasquatch was a Wendigo was this rogue Sasquatch that went cannibalistic and started killing people, when the original literature was much different than any known Sasquatch or Bigfoot creature. They were, if you read the literature, it was definitely something not of that same ilk.
I have to ask, what's your favorite lake monster of Wisconsin?
Oh, gosh. Now, I've traveled the world looking for lake monsters, from Loch Ness to Lake Champlain, but in Wisconsin, I think my favorite is a creature called Peppy, and it's a creature on Lake Pepin, which is a lake on the Mississippi River. So it's an anomaly in its own right, and it divides Wisconsin and Minnesota. And dating back to the indigenous people there, they would see it, and we have newspaper accounts from the Civil War era about this monster being in the lake. And what I love about this legend is that the people of Lake City, Minnesota are so convinced that it's real, that Peppy is a sea monster, that they are now offering a $50,000 reward for the capture of it. Much like P.T. Barnum offered a reward for the Lake Champlain monster. They're following in his footsteps and hoping that, at least you'll come looking for it, that they're offering a reward that nobody has claimed, obviously. But I love that because it's a lake on the river, so you have a current. You have a lot of weird fish in there, from garfish to huge catfish, but also just them adding that reward just gives it this fun folklore type legend that it normally wouldn't enjoy.
And you wrote an entire book about Pepe as well. So
yes, and again, that's another one of those very specific. It's just specific to this area of Lake Pepin's about 20 miles long, about 1.5 miles wide, and relatively shallow. But yet people are seeing this giant monster, and people believe they've captured photographic evidence of it. And the town's embracing it, whether or not they believe it. And I found that to be a more modern phenomena as well, that these towns, they're really enjoying their history and their legends. Again, whether or not they believe it's a different question, but they take pride in knowing that they have this really cool legend in their backyard. And skeptics are quick to say, oh, you're capitalizing on it. You're making money off of this legend. Obviously, it's not true. But why wouldn't they? If they found oil in their backyard, wouldn't they use that?
Yeah.
I think there's no harm in using your history and your legend as a tourist draw. Why wouldn't you? People use mountains, they use lakes, the beauty of their area. So I see legends as no different than that.
unfortunately, the only lake cryptid that we covered so far in Pennsylvania was the Raystown Ray, and that has actually been debunked. Like, the people came out and basically said, yeah, we made it up as a Halloween kind of story, and it literally was published on Halloween night, so we didn't know it was going to go this far. And then for years, like we're talking like late 70s, I think it was, all the way even to the present day. But it's interesting because of two things. One, people know that it's not real, or at least they've been told, nah, this was all a joke that went too far. But they still love that Raystown Ray. You're still going to find T-shirts and posters and coffee mugs, and
I think they named like the school mascot.
Yeah,
which I love when they do that. I love, like, yeah, let's be the Raytown Rays, guys.
Yeah, right. But if you go further back, there was a legend in that area before. This is a man-made lake, so it's kind of, it's a reservoir basically. But there was a part of a river of where this water came from. There was a legend of an unknown, very large creature, aquatic, that was going up and down the river and fishermen would have problems with it because they couldn't really see what it was, but yet they'd be fishing and it would take their bait or their fish away, like, almost like a big shark coming up and eating it. Not that that's what it was, but the quote hoax got started because that legend was there from like the 1890s. Now it's the Raystown Ray, but I'm like, it's so funny. But yeah, I'm going to buy a pin of the Raystown Ray, even though I know it's not real. I'm still there,
I can't tell you how many people have contacted me claiming that they started a specific legend back in the 1980s or 90s, and they don't realize that oftentimes these legends have been circulating for 50, 70 years prior to them coming forward, where they may have hoaxed it, but they just added to the legend. They didn't create the legend. They just added a piece to it. And sometimes you get the exact opposite, like in Rhinelander, Wisconsin. They embraced the hodag, which is a fictional creature that was created in the 1800s, but they've embraced it we mentioned, all the school mascots are the hodags. The police cars and fire trucks have the hodag on their vehicles. The entire town embraces it, where, the laundromats, the hodag laundromat or the hodag liquor store, which is funny in its own right. But so all these businesses, they know it's not true. They don't even pretend it's true, but they embrace the legend of it because it's so much fun.
Yeah. And that's, if the community's having fun with it, that doesn't automatically discount the fact that potentially there is, or at one point was, I'm just going to say hodag. I don't think that's real. But, if we have the Albatwitch school, I don't know. Like, I think Albatwitches are possible in the realm of possibility. I'm going to say, let's say that. If the school mascot is Albatwitches and, like, I start selling t-shirts of it, like you said, it doesn't discredit it. To me, anyway, it doesn't discredit anything. It's like, why? It's a capitalist society. Of course, they're going to try and make $1 off of it.
What I think would be even funnier is that if after all of this, and I think that they were thinking, this creature from the river might have gotten transferred into the reservoir during the making of it, that it got cut off and it couldn't get back into the river. Okay, that actually makes sense. Man, wouldn't it be funny if this whole time that people were like, oh no, it was a hoax, but then it's not. There actually is something in the lake. Oh man, I would love that. That would be funny.
I mean, there are fish species that like get freaking huge. I think people, especially today, forget how big sometimes like some fish can actually get.
I agree. If a 9-foot sturgeon swims up against you, you're going to think it's a sea monster, and it is. It's just one that we happen to know about. The same with an alligator gar. If you've ever seen photos of the garfish, they're gigantic and creepy looking. And again, if you're swimming and something brushes that big against you, it's going to be pretty terrifying.
I have to say, what's funny about the ray, though, is that it's not a ray at all. It's portrayed as basically like a Loch Ness type dinosaur looking, plesiosaur. Like, come on, guys. It's not even a ray. Like, at least make him look like a ray. I have to mention your Lumberjack Creatures of the Northwoods book, because that was actually the first book that I picked up that you wrote. Kinda got a soft spot for the Lumberjack tales. And the one that we have that kind of is from here. Well, it's definitely from here, but it's sort of related to lumberjacks in the Northwoods of Pennsylvania is the squonk.
Yes, the poor squonk.
Yes.
Feeling bad about itself and crying because of its hideous looks, and you'll hear it. And if any of your listeners are not familiar with the old Lumberjack Creatures, think of the hodag or the hoop snake, those type of things. When back in the days of logging, when thousands of men would leave their homes every winter and head up into the lumber camps and spend the season cutting the lumber, the woods seemed inexhaustible. They seemed to go on forever. Anything could be living in there. So at night, when they came back to the bunkhouse and they'd sit around spinning yarns and telling tales with one another, all of a sudden the wind and the ice that was cracking the trees, that wasn't the weather. That was the splinter cat jumping out of a tree and using its anvil head to smash into other trees looking for bees. So they would try to tell these rookies, the greenhorns, all of these creatures, these fantastic creatures that were existing in the Northwoods. And as of today, we have over 100 different creatures that the lumberjacks believed in that were inhabiting the Northwoods. And what's tricky is that at the same time they were talking about the jackalope, they also had Bigfoot sightings. Of course, they didn't call them Bigfoot or Sasquatch. The terms weren't there back then, but they talked about these giant wild men of the woods, these hairy beasts that were looking like giant gorillas. And amazingly, we have a lot of those reports. And same with the will-o'-the-wisp, these weird disembodied lights that were floating through the woods. But at the same time as they were reporting that, again, they were reporting a jackalope. So you have to take it all with a grain of salt.
Jackalopes. And the camp chipmunk. That one got me.
Yeah, and the camp chipmunk, I don't know why it's not as popular as the jackalope. If you've ever stopped at a roadside tourist shop, especially out west, you've probably seen the jackalope. It's a rabbit with antlers on its head that was thought to live in many different species of it, and it's the fastest creature on the planet. It can run over 100 miles an hour when it wanted to, but people almost hunted it to extinction because they figured it had a weakness, and that weakness was drinking alcohol. So cowboys and ranchers and lumberjacks would put out a bunch of alcohol, and the jackalopes would come and drink it and get intoxicated, and they couldn't move very fast because they were drunk, so you could shoot them. Luckily, the government stepped in and outlawed baiting of jackalopes with alcohol, so you can no longer, but that doesn't mean they won't sneak up around your campfire and steal your drink that's on the ground. They'll still trickster do that, but yeah, the jackalope, you can buy stuffed ones at Wall Drug and anywhere else that you happen to stop on your road trip.
But yeah, no love for camp chipmunk, man. And
no, so the camp chipmunk, so they had to get rid of the prunes, the core, of the prune, and they didn't know what to do with all these at the lumber camps. And believe it or not, prunes were very popular in the early 1900s. All sorts of desserts. But the pits were terrible. So they would load these pits in a wheelbarrow and just dump them at the back of the camp. And it was said that the local chipmunks started eating all of these pits, and they grew to an enormous size where they could kill bears and moose and elk. So the lumberjacks had to go on a hunting expedition to kill these camp chipmunks. And some say many of them got away and they're still roaming the Northwoods. And now when people discard their prune pits, they have to do it in a better manner.
All I know is that as a gardener, chipmunks they're absolutely adorable, but they eat and they get into everything. So I can't imagine also having to have a very large chipmunk keep that one in the woods.
That was just a black bear, right? Like that's that's what they're talking about. Just a really cute black bear.
And that's the thing is they created these legends and folklore as almost believable, but not that one per se, but like the hoop snake, which is a snake that was able to grab its own tail in its mouth and create a hoop, and it could roll downhill at extreme speeds and chase you. And at some point you think, well, maybe that could happen. It's just on that realm of believability that makes you question it. And some others are just absolutely bonkers, like the bee-skeeto, which was half bee, half mosquito, because they started breeding with one another, these giant mosquitoes of the Midwest with these giant bees of the South, and they produced offspring that were half mosquito, half bee, and they had a stinger on each end, which meant they could get you whether you were coming or going.
If those were real, I would be the first person on Mars as far away as I possibly could get from this planet.
Well, to make matters worse, they started breeding with fireflies, which meant now they could see in the dark as well.
Oh my gosh,
so they could
night
come after
hunters.
You. Yes.
Nice.
So you better talk to some billionaire about your trip to Mars.
Elon, we're becoming friends.
Oh no.
Ugh, no.
right now, no. Chad, do you have anything besides this book? Do you have anything coming up next year?
Yeah, I'm always working on weird things that are just kind of on the peripheral of paranormal. And what I mean by that is when I do lumberjack legends or winter legends and folklore, they're still in the paranormal realm, but just a little on the a little outside the norm. And I'm working on some new legends of circus legends and folklore involving the supernatural. And then, of course, I'm also doing some train stuff of old train legends of phantoms and all of the weird train legends that were amongst all the old hobos and the rail riders from 100 years ago. So I love these things that are just out there a little bit. They fit into the supernatural or paranormal, but they're just on the outskirts a bit.
That is really interesting because I swear to you, I just watched, it was a YouTube channel. I honestly can't think of what it's called right now, but they had an Ohio legend about a train that was on fire that was seen by like a doctor and somebody else. And there's actually the history behind it and where it came from. And I thought, wow, that's so cool. Cause like phantom trains, phantom cars, phantom trains, like all that stuff too is just super interesting to me. Anything that's like happening on traveling on a road or like by train. So that's cool.
I do a lot of my lectures at public libraries, which means I'm dealing with a lot of the general public, not diehard interested researchers. So a lot of the people that come to my lectures, they might be interested, but they might not even believe in these things, but they say, it's fun, it's interesting, I really want to check it out. So I'm talking to a lot of people who, again, they're not diehards into it. So they're just looking for the fun, cool stories. They don't care that you spent 6 months figuring out that somebody died one day before they said they were supposed to, and that's the story of their ghost. That doesn't intrigue them, but fiery trains, that certainly does.
Right?
To be fair, fiery trains also intrigue me. I'm in.
I think that's your new t-shirt there, a fiery train.
Oh my goodness. So yeah, where can people find you out and about? You said you're doing lectures. Is that just locally or are you planning on traveling anywhere the next few months?
I'm throughout the Midwest mainly these days. You can, on my website, I have a whole list of all my upcoming appearances, and otherwise just think of the weirdest legend you can think of, go out there, and that's probably where you'll bump into me.
And there's plenty of books. They're available on Amazon. That's where I've been buying mine from, but you can also go to your website, right? I think I actually ordered the one that's just coming out, Winter Legends and Lore. I think I ordered that directly from your website.
You certainly can, and if having it signed is important to people, which for a lot of people it is, you can get that through my website. But again, if you want to make Bezos a little extra coin to walk around with, you can get it at any bookstore if you can find bookstores anymore, and of course all the big online places too.
Yeah, unfortunately, I'm in a situation where I hate my poor heart. I don't have enough room for any more physical books right now. It hurts. I was a Borders manager for many years, and so I have a huge library. So I've had to switch over to Kindle for a little bit. So that's where I say unfortunately, but I have a lot of your books on Kindle only because I just literally don't have enough room, except for Legends and Lore. I was like, nope, I'm going to get a physical copy of that book. But the Supernatural Dares of the Midwest, The Curses, Monsters, and Ghosts, I just ordered that. So I haven't read that one yet, but that's definitely another, like we just talked about. That sounds like it's going to be great.
Boy, do I miss Borders. Wow, I love that store.
I miss it too, because I always joke, I'm like, by degree, I'm an anthropologist, physical anthropologist, and archaeologist, but I was making the same amount of money being a Borders manager at the time.
Mm-hmm.
So I just stayed with it. It was also, unfortunately, during a time when there just wasn't a lot available for me to find work in, because I was living in North Carolina at the time. So there just wasn't a lot available in that home state at the time. So I wound up just staying with Borders and loving it. And yes, I have too many. I might have too many books. Is it really a thing though? I mean,
do you really?
Right? See, yeah, you just add some more. It's fine.
You don't have too many books. You have too few book shelves.
That's it. I don't need another room for another library, an additional library.
Yeah,
oh, man.
I think we all need that stereotypical big library with the ladders in it and the fireplace and the couches. Yes.
Yes, and thank God I'm married to a man who that is an ultimate goal. Like someday we will have that. He's like, he wanted a big round turret library that had like 3 floors. And you could, look down and I'm like, yes, thank you. One day maybe. I have to buy a castle somewhere. Well, Chad, I could talk like for hours and hours and hours about all this stuff with you. It has been such a pleasure to have you be able to meet with us today, and you're welcome back anytime to talk about anything at all, including of course anything new you have coming out, which look, when that book comes out about fiery trains or phantom
Let us know.
whatever,
We're on it.
yes.
I will, and it's in the works. Don't you worry.
There's so many, and I've really honestly enjoyed all of them that I've had so far. Yeah, now I'm looking at the Big Muddy Monster one.
And if you liked Paranormal Prairie, the same director Joe Torre did. It's on Amazon and Tubi and Roku and others. Creature from Big Muddy. It's a documentary on the Big Muddy Monster, which is very, very good. So if that fascinates you, if you liked kind of his style, you might like that one as well. And I think it's free.
There's too many things I want to talk about.
Well, we have plenty of extra shows we can do. Yes,
I was going to say, you're absolutely welcome back anytime. We're changing things up just slightly today to get the word out about one of our favorite podcasts, Christmas special airing tomorrow, and that is October Pod with Edward October. When we get back, some final Spooky Squad news as we close out this season.
I'm Edward October. Ask any bold individualist and they'll tell you. All you need for a perfect eggnog is to combine egg yolks, beaten until creamy, egg whites, beaten until fluffy, heavy cream, a generous portion of fresh ground nutmeg, and an even more generous portion of liquor. Most people use dark rum. I prefer bourbon. The final 2 ingredients are essential. A cozy seat by the fire to sip it, and a ghost story, told as only Octoberpod can tell it. This year, Octoberpod's gift to you is a Christmas ghost story that can easily be called a classic of the medium. It drops on December 25th, Christmas Day. Find it on our YouTube channel, Octoberpod Home Video, or on Octoberpod AM, wherever you get podcasts. You can find all of our links at octoberpodvhs.com. Listen by the fire, and we guarantee it will be the crowning pleasure of your busy holiday season. After all, eggnog without a belt of good hooch is hardly eggnog, and Christmas without an Octoberpod ghost story is hardly Christmas. Octoberpod, Yuletide horror for bold individualists.
Welcome back. First of all, we'd like to thank each and every one of you for listening to Mission Spooky. We have been blown away by the support we've gotten over the last 3 seasons. We can't wait to get to work on season 4. We've also gotten a lot of suggestions from our listeners and Patreon supporters for topics to cover, so remember, feel free to email us your topic suggestions on any questions or comments on any of the previous episodes. We welcome our latest Patreon supporters, Devin and Frederick. Thank you so much for joining the Spooky Squad. If you want to join the squad yourself, head over to patreon.com/missionspooky. We have tiers at the $1, $3, and $5 levels. One single buck gets you our undying gratitude, access to our boober reels, access to our archived state episodes with just me and JC, and of course, a shout out on the cast. The $3 level gets you all of that, plus early access to our side missions and exclusive access to Kiki's Quirks, which are side topics I've saved just for our Patreon folks. You also receive access to the digital stat block and art card for Cord vs. Cryptid. The $5 level gets you everything above, plus access to our private Discord server, which after 3 years, we still haven't figured out what we're going to do with it yet. You also get access to our exclusive state episodes, which now include Cord. Anyone can join our regular Discord community, which we are trying to grow. We have channels dedicated to cryptids, ghosts, and UFOs. We have a place for you to promote yourself to if you're an artist or fellow podcaster. We have a D&D chat in there and a general gaming chat. Basically, we just want you to come hang out with us and like-minded folks. You can follow us on Twitter until it self-destructs, and on Instagram at Mission Spooky. We're making some fun and creative changes to Instagram, so be sure to follow us on there for interactive content. Don't forget to rate and review us on iTunes, Podchaser, and Good Pods. Just remember, be kind. Tomorrow is Christmas Day or Yule, and we have a special gift for you from us and the Darkcast Network. Tomorrow, you'll be able to listen to the Darkcast Network's Naughty and Nice lists. We chose the nice list this year with an updated story of the Christmas Pickle. Some of the podcasts that contributed this year include our friends The Crime Diner, Autumn's Oddities, and Rogue Darkness, to name a few. From all of us at Mission Spooky, have a very merry Yule, and seriously, stay spooky and don't die. No, seriously, be careful out there during the holidays because we don't really want you to have to contact us from the other side.